Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to create great relationships. If you want a great relationship, you need to stop being a nice guy, but obviously also without becoming a fucking jerk. How do I know that? Because when I was the nice guy, I got dumped with, "You're such a great guy, but let's just stay friends." Yeah. So I swung to the other extreme, became more dominant, became more selfish, became more like macho, and women desired me, yeah, but I still got dumped after some months because this time just for a different reason. You're a dickhead. How could I ever fucking trust you? Outcome was always the same. So in this video, I'm going to break down my secret framework that has helped me easily stay in long-term relationships after I fucking figured out that it's not the nice guy, it's not the macho either. So the biggest mistake that my clients used to make when they get into relationships is that they use the wrong measurement to determine the success or the quality of their relationship. So in other words, most men determine the quality of the relationship by how happy their girlfriend is, right? And they turn into fucking Kevin. And Kevin's think basically unconsciously that her mood determines the value of them as a partner because yeah, they don't want to be a bad man, which is totally understandable, right? But what if I actually told you that this mindset makes you a bad partner because you're too concerned with her approval rather than protecting the relationship? Kevin's live under this false belief that her wants determine her attraction to him, but what actually influences this attraction is her needs, not her wants. Let me give you an analogy. For example, I'm sure you want candies, burgers, fries, and whiskey ideally every day, right? But you also need to eat veggies, to go to the gym, drink 3 liters of water and whatnot. So imagine that if you would only focus on your wants, what would happen to your fucking life? The most important KPI of your life would be like negative, aka saying, "Are you still alive?" No, bro, you're done. You're gone because you've lived an unhealthy lifestyle. The same concept applies to relationships. And the problem is that in relationships, Kevin's leadership is basically based on what makes her happy, which is comfort and reassurance and agreement. But paradoxically, over time, that exact behavior will make her unhappy and she'll become bossy and bitchy. Because attraction isn't built on wants, it's built on needs, as I said. And one of a woman's core needs is assertive, empathetic leadership, a great CEO, not a fucking customer service representative who's always chasing her like, "Oh, how are you happy? How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do to become a better partner?" Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that you should become a fucking dickhead. Assertiveness and leadership are not the same as being a jerk. The problem is that when you are a Kevin, you equate an unhappy or crying woman with bad behavior, with being a dick. But again, let me ask you this, bro. When the CEO tells his director of strategy that he's doing a shitty job because the revenue numbers are down, for which the director of strategy is responsible for, right? And now the director of strategy is unhappy about being told of, does this make the CEO a bad leader or a great leader? Let's put aside the how of the feedback, right? Like how he communicated feedback. If we judge the quality of the feedback on the director's mood, the CEO is a bad leader, right? If we judge the quality of the feedback based on his responsibilities of driving revenue numbers up, which the director is responsible for and has not delivered on, I would say the CEO is a great fucking leader because he's holding him accountable. So in this scenario, we can agree that the director's mood would not be a great KPI for the quality of the CEO's leadership style, because the CEO would not be doing his job correctly if he would hold back his feedback only to protect his director's little feelings. It would jeopardize the entire fucking company. So let me ask you this: why in a non-romantic relationship, aka business, is this approach or this leadership style correct and constructive, but in a romantic relationship, suddenly this kind of leadership style is destructive? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Now, I'm not saying that you should be a dick about communicating your feedback, but what I'm saying is that you should not and must not never ever abandon your leadership. Now, that leads me to the next point. How do you lead exactly so that you don't become a Kevin CEO, but also not a tyrant CEO of the relationship? I call it becoming a Hercules. How do you become a Hercules CEO? How do you become a great leader? You need 2 things. Again, this all applies to your relationships, by the way, to your romantic relationships. First, you need to define your leadership style, and the one that women are most drawn to is what I call red masculine leadership. Red masculine leadership stands for the direction you want to take, yeah? And the issue is that most men who are Kevins, they are just merely feathers in the wind. They are directionless. They have no spine. They're pushovers. And your job is to stop being a Kevin and become a fucking Hercules. And you become a Hercules by defining the map of your leadership. How big is your kingdom, aka your relationship? Meaning, what do you want to build together on this map? Yeah. What's living like in that kingdom? And by the way, the reason why I use a map as an example is because a map has points of direction, but it also has borders, and those borders represent your fucking boundaries. You need to know what you stand for, what you say yes to, what you say no to, and what you're willing to compromise on. Like, what are the rules of engagement of the relationship? What are things that you're going to sort of enforce, stand behind, and are non-negotiables, such as, should she be allowed to have male friends? How do you respond when she keeps cutting you off? How do you respond when she starts physically hitting you when she cannot control her emotion? What are you going to say no to? This is actually the secret to strong leadership and amazing relationships, because think about it. If you don't say no when you want to say no, she will lose trust in your yes, because she doesn't know whether or not you actually mean it or you're just saying it to fucking please her. Again, coming back to the example, a man who always agrees feels like a feather in the wind, and a woman cannot trust a man who is a fucking feather. Now, this doesn't mean becoming a dickhead, because again, you're determining the laws of your relationship, meaning you determine also how you set those boundaries. I'm going to explain in just a second how you can set like the rules of engagement, the laws of the relationship, yeah, in a charismatic way, so that actually you become even more attractive, and it makes it so much easier for her to like respect your boundaries, because you've set them in a very like a charismatic way rather than just like a tyrant. But before I do that, I want to share with you like the kind of non-negotiables in my relationships. For example, Sandra knows that I'm always going to support her no matter what. But when I say I am busy and she says, oh, let's stay in bed, one more cuddle, please don't go to the gym or whatnot, or can you stop working? She knows I'm not going to compromise on this. My word means something. If I say I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to go to the fucking gym. Yes, she can give it a try and say, oh, can please stay in bed. But if I say no, and she keeps insisting, oh, please, please, please stay in bed, unless she is having a fucking really hard week, tough week, or she's on her period, maybe, I'm going to tell her, hey, can you fucking stop doing this? I've asked you to not do this. I've asked you to respect my boundaries in a more charming way. This is a quite assertive way. But there are also more charming ways, which I'm going to teach you in a second as well, by the way, right? But what matters now is that you are confident enough and secure enough in yourself, and also like trusting yourself that she's not going to leave you when you set that boundary. So that you fundamentally fucking speak up, stand up for yourself to protect the relationship, rather than to protect her mood. So how do you set charismatic boundaries? And I know this is a massive issue for a lot of guys, because they lack the skill to package boundaries in a sexy, charismatic, and attractive way, which I'm obviously going to teach you now. Now, what the fuck does being charismatic actually mean? I personally call it the art of using words to make someone say, this guy is different, actually. This is basically part of the orange masculine frame inside of you. Think of this orange frame as the car that gets you from A to B on the map, right? You could bluntly state your boundaries, like as I did earlier, without much thought to eloquence or wittiness. That's basically like driving a Prius to get from A to B. Or you could rearrange the letters and words of a sentence so profoundly that it creates the experience of driving in an Aston Martin from A to B. So do you see what I just did there? Do you see what I did there? I'm sure you did. I'll give you a couple of tools that I teach my clients and use every single day to display charismatic leadership in my relationships and around women, and also even like in my business. So here's the first element of charismatic communication, which is charismatic boundary setting. So for example, one of my clients initially was too afraid to set boundaries with his girlfriends, right? Like when she was coming late to a date or like a date night or whatnot, right? He just let it slide because he didn't want to cause conflict. He didn't want to ruin the night. Now, after a few weeks of eliminating that fucking Kevin is in his head, right? He had the balls to finally tell her to stop being late because it was disrespectful for him. And it was also fucking ruining the mood. Now, unfortunately, he had skipped the charisma calls that we have every week. So he literally said to her, like, next time she was late, stop being fucking late. I mean, granted, great stuff. He set the boundary, but not in the most charismatic way and not in the most optimal way, because believe it or not, when you set a boundary in a charismatic way, it makes it extremely attractive. However, the way he did it wasn't attractive. It sounded like a dickhead. It was actually detrimental. So how would you frame this in a charismatic Hercules way? You want to call out the action without shaming the person, yeah? Ideally in a funny way to take out the heat from the moment. So for example, if Sandra is late, which happens, I would say, hey, Bambi, you're annoyingly cute sometimes, but there's one thing that I would really find sexy, which is I do like punctuality, which you seem to struggle with. How can we fix this? Do you need a new watch or what's happening? Do you see how grounded I say this? But there's more to just the groundedness. There's also 5 elements there about communication language that I'm using. So I start with a nickname to bring down her guard, right? Bambi. I use a push-pull compliment to soften her a bit, annoyingly cute. I then link the boundary, aka punctuality, to something that makes her more attractive in my eyes, rather than trying to punish her, right? Why do I do this? Because humans are more eager to move towards pleasure, right? Rather than move towards pain. And then I attack the problem rather than her by saying, how can we fix this? And then finally, I sprinkle in some teasing, right? To make her aware that being late consistently is a bit of a low IQ move, but without really saying it. AKA, do you need a fucking watch? Now, setting boundaries in a charismatic way is just the foundation. You also want to be charismatic when you display empathy. So the issue that a lot of guys have when they are Kevin, they view women through this male paradigm, aka when she shares a problem or she says she has a bad day, they immediately try to fix the problem, thinking this is a display of empathy rather than actually addressing the underlying emotion. Because addressing the underlying emotion, that is a sign of empathy. Fixing the problem when she hasn't asked for it, that is not empathy, that is invalidation. So here's how you display empathy in such a way that melts her heart, right? And pulls her in closer, makes you look way more attractive. And you can use nonverbal and verbal communication for this. So nonverbal empathy is basically just nodding your head along while she shares that she's having a bad day, right? Do you see what I'm doing with my eyes and with my head nod, right? So why does this work? Because the nervous system will pick up on your head movement, which will make her feel acknowledged. When you make her feel acknowledged, she's going to feel safe, and more connected to you, which will build more trust, which is the foundation of attraction, bro. Now, how do you display verbal empathy? This is a cheat code, bro, and my clients love this. Yeah, I use what I call labeling. It's a technique that I learned in leadership development at a tech startup, as well as in sales and finance. So labeling is basically split into two parts. Part one is something like it sounds like or it seems like, right? That's how you start the sentence that labels her emotion. The first part, like it sounds like, it seems like, is sort of like a hint at the fact that you're making an assumption. It makes the person feel seen or feel heard. And the beauty here is that you don't have to be right? Because what brings you two closer together in that moment when you label her emotions isn't being right, but more so like creating the safe space for her to express herself fully. So here's an example. I'm going to put this message up on the screen now. Sandra sent me this text saying that she went quiet a bit because she felt drained. So instead of bombarding her with questions that might be a bit too invasive right now, so instead of saying, oh, do you want to talk about it? Or sorry to hear that, how are you feeling? Which she might not be open to share just yet, I use labeling to get her slowly to open up. So what do? I just repeat what she says. Reframe it. Sounds like you drained from all the work lately. I know this looks silly, but it works like a charm because as you see now, she's just continuing with the flow and opens up more, which creates this impression that we are in this struggle together, which is super sexy because humans, they bond through shared struggle, man. Awesome. Now that we've covered this, I want to share with you the final part of today's charisma sort of lesson, right? Which is basically how to create sexual tension over text or in person, which I know for a fact 99% of men struggle to fucking achieve. Like, I know that I literally spoke to a guy yesterday who was dog shit at digital or offline sexy conversation because he never learned it. He just got out of divorce. They got divorced because there was no intimacy, no sex, because again, he lacked the skill to keep sexual attraction up. It shows the importance of really mastering the skill because otherwise you're going to end up getting divorced. 90% of my clients, they lost a woman or they got divorced because they never knew how to fucking build sexual attraction. They relied on love, but love isn't enough for a sustained great relationship. Why are so many men so bad at sexual charismatic communication? Because we men think in facts and we have a straight line communication style. So our messages are very direct and blunt, right? However, flirting and sexual tension, that lives in ambiguity, right? It lives in emotions and in images you create and you paint with your words. So all my engineers, all my bankers, and all my accountants fucking struggle with doing this because it goes completely against their nature. For example, a lot of guys keep telling the girlfriend how beautiful and sexy she is. Now, that by itself is great. Women love to be desired. But if you hear the same thing over and over and over again, you become habituated to it, meaning it loses its value. So the attractive skill here is to learn how to say the same fucking thing in 1,000 different ways. Let me show you one of the exercises I did with my clients to teach them how to say you're beautiful, you're attractive in various different ways to make them way more charismatic and way more charming. I find you attractive. How could you say this in different words? How could you describe her being attractive? You could say what it does to you.
You really stand out from the other girls, or there's something about you I can't put my finger on, but
Yeah, much better. There's something because it's more ambiguous. Everything has to be more subtle, more ambiguous. Something in me likes you. So here's what I could think of. Your visual representation does create an emotion in my body. The reason why this is charming as well is because it is outrageous language. It's poetic. Like language or like flirting is all about creating an emotion in someone. It has to be absurd at times as well. You're beautiful is an outright compliment. Your visual representation does create an emotion in my body is a poetic way, poetic description of her presence, and is so much more creates a much more powerful image in her mind rather than just saying you're beautiful. Like, you won't believe the power of being capable of creating sexy stuff out of thin air, bro. Like, here's another example of how I teach some of my private clients how to keep sexual tension up over text using like a mundane message such as, Hercules, we have 3 mosquitoes in the room.
So Sandra sends me, by the way, we have 3 flies and mosquitoes last night. Hercules needs to be back. So I usually I take care of that because, I'm so strong. I'm fearless.
So my response would be, seems like there's more than one thing that needs to get slapped tonight.
You would not be 99% of men would not be able to use this as a segue to start a sexual conversation. By the way, if you like what you saw here, why don't you apply to work with me? Don't be shy, bro. I can literally change your life in 5 months. It's your choice, bro. The more charismatic you become, the more sexually attracted a woman will be to you. And you do not want to miss out on her craziest, wildest fantasies, which I talk about in this video now.